Hi friends, welcome back to Exam Pediatrics. I'm Dr. Vidya, a pediatrician. Today, let's learn all about the inactivated polio vaccine that protects us against poliomyelitis. Poliomyelitis is caused by poliovirus, which is an enterovirus, and it enters our body through the mouth, that is through the fecal-oral route from contaminated food or water, or the oropharyngeal route via droplets when an affected patient or carrier sneezes or coughs. The virus enters through the mouth and binds to the receptors on the mucosal cells in the oropharynx and small intestine. Virus enters the cell and replicate. Once the cell gets lysed, new viruses are released, which partly gets excreted through the feces, while the remaining enter the bloodstream via lymphatics. The spectrum of clinical features caused by poliovirus varies from 90 to 95% being asymptomatic to less than 1% developing paralytic poliomyelitis. There are three antigenically distinct strains of poliovirus. They include wild poliovirus type 1, wild poliovirus type 2, and wild poliovirus type 3. They all cause similar symptoms, but genetic differences make these three strains three separate viruses that must each be eradicated separately. Wild poliovirus strains can access the central nervous system, while the vaccine strains do not replicate in the central nervous system. Now, very rarely, revertants of Sabin vaccine strains can regain their neurovirulence, causing vaccine-associated paralytic polio, or VAP, either in the vaccinated child or in a close contact. Sometimes, the Sabin vaccine strains can mutate, regaining their neurovirulence and transmissibility of the wild poliovirus, thus known as vaccine-derived poliovirus or VDPV, and the circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus can cause polio outbreaks. People need protection against all three types of polioviruses to prevent polio, for which we have two vaccines, one being the oral polio vaccine or the OPV, and the second being the inactivated polio vaccine or the IPV. Now this can be given as a full dose IPV, which is given as 0.5 ml intramuscularly, or a fractional dose of IPV, which is given as 0.1 ml intradermally, that is 1/5 the full dose of the IPV vaccine. One might wonder why fractional IPV when a full dose IPV can be given. One of the main reasons being our demand is more than the supply. And in this way, a larger number of our infants can be vaccinated. Moreover, it has been proven that two fractional doses offer a higher immunogenicity compared to one full dose IPV. Coming to the timeline of introduction of the inactivated polio vaccine. In 1988, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, called GPEI, was launched by the World Health Assembly. In 2013 January, Polio Eradication and Endgame Strategy Plan 2013 to 2018 was launched by the GPEI. In November 2013, the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts, called SAGE, recommended the global withdrawal of type 2 component from trivalent OPV from the immunization programs by April 2016, and that all countries should introduce at least one dose of IPV into their immunization schedules at least 6 months in advance to the proposed switch date. That was to fill the gap in type 2 immunity. So why do we want to withdraw Sabin type 2 from trivalent OPV? As we know, the wild poliovirus type 2 has been eradicated globally. And as I said earlier, rarely Sabin vaccine strains can cause VAP and circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus. And it was found that in 90% of the cases, these were caused by Sabin type 2 strain. So, it was decided to replace trivalent OPV, which contains strains 1, 2, and 3, with bivalent OPV, which contains strains 1 and 3. And to provide protection against type 2 strain, it was decided to give at least one dose of IPV, which contains all three strains. Let's see how India introduced IPV into its immunization schedule. By October-November 2015, India introduced one full dose IPV in 6 selected Indian states and was given at 14 weeks of age. On 25th April 2016, there was a nationally coordinated switch from trivalent OPV to bivalent OPV, and there was a phased introduction of fractional IPV beginning with 8 selected states and was given at 6 and 14 weeks of age. By June 2017, there had been a complete switch to the use of fractional IPV in the national immunization schedule. Coming to the inactivated polio vaccine per se. It is composed of cell culture derived poliovirus inactivated with formaldehyde. In 1955, Jonas Salk developed the first ever licensed vaccine against polio, and it was composed of inactivated poliovirus strains of all 3 poliovirus types and was called the Salk vaccine or IPV. Enhanced IPV. It is IPV made using better methods of production, and the current generation of IPV is made by formaldehyde inactivation of laboratory maintained and vero cell grown wild poliovirus vaccine strains. The preservative used is 2-phenoxyethanol. Thiomycin is not used because it affects the IPV potency. Nowadays, IPV is made from selected wild poliovirus strains or Sabin strains. If made from selected wild poliovirus strains, they are composed of Mahani strain, that is type 1 strain, MEF1, that is type 2 strain, and Socket, that is type 3 strain. The Indian Academy of Pediatrics and the Advisory Committee for Vaccines and Immunization Practices 2018-19 guidelines on polio vaccines is as follows. The birth dose of OPV is a must. No child should leave the health facility without polio immunization, either IPV or OPV. Bivalent OPV should be continued in place of IPV only if IPV is not feasible. The minimum age of administration of IPV is 6 weeks. And the best option is 3 doses of intramuscular IPV at 6, 10 and 14 week schedule, either as a standalone IPV or as a combination vaccine. Guidelines continued. 2 doses of intramuscular IPV instead of 3 doses can be administered if the primary series is started at 8 weeks of age, with the minimum interval between doses being 8 weeks. In case IPV is not available, offer 3 doses of bivalent OP in a 6, 10, 14 week schedule, and also advise the infant to receive 2 fractional doses of IPV at a government facility at 6 and 14 weeks of age, or at least 1 dose of IM-IPV. At 6 to 18 months, bivalent OPV is recommended if IPV booster is not available. IPV is stored at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius because freezing inactivates IPV. And IPV comes with a vaccine vial monitor to monitor the potency. IPV has an excellent track record on efficacy and safety. There is no risk of VAP or circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus. It induces a good humoral immunity, but has a poor induction of intestinal immunity. And there is no herd immunity. Adverse effects. There could be a few local effects like local pain, erythema, and induration. Contraindications to IPV. IPV contains trace amounts of streptomycin, neomycin, and polymyxin B. So if there are infants with known allergy to any of these components, it's a contraindication. Also, history of allergic reaction to a previous dose of IPV is another contraindication. Available formulations of IPV in India. It's available as a liquid vaccine. Under the UIP, it is available as a 5 or 10 dose vial. Now the available brand names are as combination vaccines, not as standalone vaccines. So you have Hexaxim, Infinrix Hexa and Easy 6, which contain diphtheria toxoid, tetanus toxoid, Haemophilus influenza B, hepatitis B, and inactivated poliovirus. The only difference is that hexaxim and Infandrix hexa contain acellular pertussis component, while EC6 contains the whole cell pertussis component. So friends, that was all about IPV. Do not forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Exam Pediatrics to be notified with the upcoming tutorials in the vaccine series. Thank you.